There's long been a debate in leadership and professional development about whether it's better to play to your strengths or shore up weaknesses. Now, of course, we're going to do best at things that are already strengths of ours, already comfortable for us, already match us in some way. But there can be a risk in over-identifying with those traits, or thinking that's all we are, or typing ourselves. There's also great value in recognizing the 4 basic energies that life will call for. When it's time to push, when it's time to hold, when it's time to allow and roll with it, when it's time to let go and expand. Patterns that we call the driver, the organizer, the collaborator, or the visionary. These 4 energies are available to us, even though we will have preferences among them. But when we can recognize our preferences without being prisoners of them, we move beyond playing only to our strengths to truly strengthening how we play the game of life and leadership. And so we make that our next flip. Now, these patterns run through mind and body. They are ways we move, ways we feel, ways we think, ways we do things. They can be experienced. And in fact, you'll want to have watched the video where you can experience each of these 4 energies first before watching this one. But your preferences for these energy patterns can also be measured, and that's what we do with the FEBI. Once you've taken your FEBI report, and you have your FEBI report available, the rest of this video will walk you through some of its pages and get you ready for a conversation about it. Page 5 in your FEBI report is your overall energy profile. This chart is based on the bulk of the questions you answered, normalized in a database of more than 9,000 people, and expressed in a standard score from 1 to 10, where 5.5 is average, and each point is half a standard deviation, so statistically significant. 9 and 10 are considered very high, 7 and 8 high. 5 and 6 represent a moderate range, the middle 40 percentile. 3 and 4 are low, and 1 and 2 very low. There's no right or wrong or judgment in these scores so much as giving you an idea of how much you see yourself using each pattern as compared with how most people see themselves using the patterns. The higher the stack, the more you see yourself accessing that pattern, and the highest stack is likely to be your home pattern, the pattern you go to unthinkingly, a likely strength. The next 4 pages will talk about a pattern one at a time and describe what happens as you crank up the energy from very low to very high in this pattern. What's true for your score is in the colored box. The next part of the report speaks to style. Most people will combine their top 2 patterns into a characteristic style they use most of the time. We call it a primary style. Now, if you don't see any styles here, it doesn't mean you have no style. It means that by the logic of the report, only a pattern you see that you have at least moderate access to would be considered available as a part of a readily accessible style. So you may have primary or backup styles, and generally speaking, more styles means more agility. You're able to bring in energies as life calls for them. But again, if there's a deficiency in your life or leadership, that's where you will draw your insight as to where there might be a pattern worth developing or getting easier access to, not from a particular FEBI score. The next part of the report says work behaviors. And this is a completely independent part of the report, not factored into that earlier graph, where you were asked, what do you actually do? What do you do? And here you couldn't give everything a high or a low score. You had to make some forced choices. So in asking the questions a different way and having you answer a different way, you can sometimes tease apart ties and confusion in the earlier part of the graph. What you gave the 5s to will appear at the top, then the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. And you might notice some patterns in here. If you covered the bottom half of this graph, You might see certain colors dominate in the top half, which would be a read of your style in practice. And then finally, we come to the end of the report, where we talk about potential risk areas, which again can be assessed only by looking at your life, not at your FEBI report, and how to develop easier access to any pattern that could mitigate those risks. And the ways to develop them are many, from work behaviors to things that you can do in your avocations, ways of using your senses, or even breathing. Take a look at these suggestions. Take a look at the report and see what lands for you. And you'll be ready for a rich conversation around how you can both work with your preferences and access any pattern as life calls for it. In a sense, getting the best out of your entire inner team of energy patterns, so that you can meet each life situation with the energy that meets it best. And this is a key part of leading according to the way.